All right, guys, back for part 3 of the spiritual leadership talk. So the first passage that we looked at in part 1 was from Isaiah chapter 40, verses 10 and 11. The second part was from Ezekiel chapter 33, the end of chapter 33, and then a quick skim through chapter 34. Again, just really pretty much hitting the high points, if you will. The third passage is from 1 Peter 5. And again, like I said, this isn't so much a kind of an exposition of the qualifications of an elder like you might find in 1 Timothy or Titus, but a description of, or just words that address those that would want to lead well. And so 1 Peter 5 specifically does address elders, leaders in the church, shepherds, if you will. And we're going to read a few verses. It does shift a little bit, though, which I think you're going to really like as we watch this shift happen, and some of the truths that carry over as the shift occurs. So there's some neat stuff here. But so anyways, 1 Peter 5, we'll read in verse 1 and go down through, let's see, 7 or 8. The elders which are among you I exhort, who am also an elder and a witness of the sufferings of Christ, and also a partaker of the glory that shall be revealed. Feed the flock of God which is among you, taking the oversight thereof, not by constraint, but willingly, not for filthy lucre, but of a ready mind, neither as being lords over God's heritage, but being examples to the flock. So let's just pause there for a second and go back to what we saw in Ezekiel 34. And it's almost as if Peter had somehow in the back of his mind, some of those things that were, indictments brought against the false shepherds, right? The self-serving shepherds of Ezekiel's day that he addresses in chapter 34. He says, feed the flock of God, right? The unfaithful shepherds were feeding themselves on the flock of God. He says, don't do it by constraint, but willingly, from a heart of love, right? Not for filthy lucre, not for what you can get out of it, but of a ready mind. Neither as being lords. Remember, they were ruling with force and brutality. But he says, but not as being lords over God's heritage. Remember, it's God's flock. It's not man's flock. He says, but being examples to the flock. And if you're doing this, he says, when the chief shepherd shall appear, you shall receive a crown of glory that fades not away. So he's saying it's worth it, right? It's hard, and it's going to cost you, and there's a strict judgment that comes from being in this place, right? But it's worth it. And God sees your labors. And if I can just say this to the leaders out there, God sees what you're going through that nobody else has any idea of that you're going through, right? They see you at 3 a.m. when you're wrestling with something and you can't sleep and your mind is occupied and you're just, it's hard. Okay. God sees it. And because there's just things you can't tell anybody about, right? It's just the nature of the role, right? But God sees it, and it's going to be worth it someday. And then he says, likewise. Okay, so if what he's saying just said to the elders, he's taking those same truths and he's saying, you know what? Just like I had, these words for them, likewise, you younger, submit yourselves unto the elder. So what's the likewise here in reference to? He's basically saying to the elders, you must submit to the over shepherd, right? You under shepherds are under submission. And this is a point here that's worth mentioning, is that if if authority is conferred on someone, it's never for the benefit. It's never for their benefit. It's for the benefit of those that's under their authority. As John Eldredge said, the true test of a king is what is life like for those underneath their rule and their leadership. Okay, so likewise, true leadership is an expression of submission to authority. Okay. Likewise, in the same way that your elders are in submission to Christ, you younger in the flock, submit yourselves to the elders, to the older ones. Yea, all of you, just in case you think this is a power play, that it's all about hierarchies and rule and, submission and all this stuff. He says, yea, just in case you missed something, yea, all of you yea, all of you be subject to one another. And just like in Ephesians chapter 5, before Paul specifically talks about wives submitting to your husbands, he says that we should all be submitted one to another in the fear of God. And Peter echoes the very same thing. So that wherever there's maybe a unique submission authority relationship, it's all couched and surrounded in a mutual submission of everyone to one another. So it goes in every direction. Got it? Right? So this is maybe easy to overlook or not seldom highlighted enough, because we talk about, who's supposed to submit to who, right? Well, we always think of it just as top-down kind of thing. Because, yea, all of you be subject one to another and be clothed with humility. Why? Because God resists the proud and gives grace to the humble. So just like we don't ever want to be the shepherd of Ezekiel 34, who God says, I am against you, right? We don't want to be this person who says, God is saying, I'm resisting you, you proud fool, you, right? That is not, I don't want to be that person. I've been that person and yesterday, today, right? I don't ever want to be that person. But if in the moment comes where I'm revealed, I've been that guy, I just want to humble myself again, right? Because the most hopeless place to be in life is to have God resisting us, right? None of us want to be in that place. But we want to be those who God is giving grace. And so there's this wonderful truth here that the key to abiding under the grace of God is abiding in humility. And that's why he says, humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time. Now, there is a sense in which we can take, and we do rightly say, when Peter says, humble yourselves, he's speaking to all of us. Yea, all of you be subject one to another, for God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Humble yourselves, like all of you, under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time. But I just want to set that aside for a moment and go back to the preceding verse, when he says in verse 5, you younger, submit yourselves unto the elder. Because it would fit that while those that are younger are called to a place of allowing themselves to be influenced and guided by those that are elder. That's what I think this means here. It means to rank yourselves under, right? It's not to be, in essence, inferior to someone else. It's consciously choosing to rank myself under someone else. It's not someone else ranking me. It's myself ranking me underneath. It's a choice I am. In fact, in a way, this is... submission is something that we each take responsibility for ourselves, right? Forced submission is not submission at all, right? If it's true submission, it's an empowering choice that I am making concerning my ranking of myself, right? It's got nothing to do with how anyone else ranks me. It's how I rank myself, okay? So I'm taking ownership over this ranking thing, okay? And I'm choosing where to rank myself, not you or anyone else, right? So, but let's just take verse 6 out of there for a second. Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time. Actually, no, we're not going to take that out. We're going to apply it directly to verse 5 when he's talking to the younger here. And I think that oftentimes leaders can become, how would you say, intimidated or threatened by ambitious young sheep, right? Ambitious future leaders, right? Those that would be zealous and have a passion and even a call, right? Like David was called, right? And anointed, and it made Saul very insecure. And oftentimes, that's an unhealthy, that will reveal something in us if we are intimidated or threatened by those that are younger. And that's why oftentimes the fist comes down hard, because we want to put them in their place because we're threatened by them. And that can be, that's a problem. That's not anything about the younger. It's an indictment against the elder, right? But let's just say that it's working in a healthy way, okay? It can still feel to the younger like, why aren't they recognizing my gift? Why are they so slow to take my advice? Why don't they see what I see so clearly, right? What's the problem with those blind elders, right? Why are they so slow? And so we can get this idea like, man, if I had the chance, this is how I would do it. Well, what God is saying is, you know what? Your day is coming. And he says, this is the way you're going to find yourself seeing it with your own eyes, right? This is how. If you, younger, humble yourselves, God will exalt you. There are these words, in due time. And that's the part we just skip over that, right? We like the idea that if we humble ourselves, God's going to exalt us, because he will. And here's the thing, God wants to exalt you. He really does. And but he's got a timing associated with it. And that timing isn't always how we would like to see it, come around. But here's the blessing, okay? So to the elders, remember, this is not your flock. It's the flock of God. You all should be abiding in a place of submission one to another. The leaders should be leading by serving and by loving. And that humility should mark all of our interactions in our relationship. And whether we're leading or whether we're more on the following side of things, whether we're more out front or whether we're serving from behind or, in the background, God sees it. And there is a crown of life for everyone who serves faithfully. And for those of us that would be young and aspiring with, passion and zeal and ideas and ambition and all this stuff, God says, I want to exalt you in due time. And so the pathway to that place, like David knew he was called, Moses knew he was called, but often we see that there's this interim period where there's this pruning, there's this season of wilderness and uncertainty, and it feels like that just people are in our way. And if only, this individual wasn't out to frustrate me, or if only they could see what I see, right? Maybe that's true. It might very well be true. But at that moment, it's really not about what they see or don't see. It's about what God is doing in us in the interim time. And so when we move now after verse 6, that he may exalt you, younger, in due time. He's saying, cast all your cares upon him, for he cares for you. Now, have you ever thought of 1 Peter 5:7 as specifically applying to those that are younger and ambitious, maybe, who are struggling in a place of maybe frustration or feeling like you're not understood, or things aren't going the way in the church or in work or wherever like you think they ought to? God is saying to you, you know what? Cast those cares. Cast your cares for how you think it ought to be going. All right? Make your appeals. I'm not saying you should just, be not active, right? I'm just saying be willing to submit those things to God and to those in your leadership chain or relationships, right? Talk about it, right? But if in fact you're called, maybe to wait for a while, cast your cares upon him, because God cares for you. So you younger ones, God specifically is inviting you Cast those cares upon him, for he cares for you. So there's my part 3 to this little spiritual leadership. What would you call it? A trilogy? I don't know. But 3 passages that have been very meaningful to me, whether it's from the front end of things as a leader, as a husband or father, or from the position of one called to submit to leadership. Something else, last thought on here, when it comes to abiding under leadership, remember, it's been helpful for me to remember that even if I see something that like maybe I wouldn't do it this way, the day may come where God's like, okay, here's your chance, buddy, do it your way. And you realize, it's not as easy as I thought it would be. The other side of that is that God isn't asking me to be responsible for everything that's going on in the church or even, in where I'm working or on a team or whatever. But he is asking me to be responsible for something. And if we're settled on what that is, we can be faithful and give an account for that without having to feel like, we're failing or we're not being, we're lacking integrity or something like that, like we're tolerating, things that we think are going wrong. It just might be the case of God is not asking you to take responsibility for that. Now, sometimes he will say, I'm asking you to speak into a situation. I'm asking you to move humbly or with meekness and address a certain person that you see something, that you're concerned about or burdens you or whatever, right? So it does happen, right? But it's very helpful. It keeps you from being overwhelmed if you're settled on what God is asking you to be responsible for and resolve to just be faithful there. So, to you elders and to those that are younger, God bless you all. Thank you for enduring and engaging this whole thing called church life, family life. It's hard, right? But it is definitely worth it. Those showers of blessings, we taste those things. We get foretastes of those when we come together and it's sweet and it's good. And we work through the hard things, right? We see that it's worth it. And as one guy said, there are some things in life worth fighting for. Amen. A church is worth fighting for. A family is worth fighting for. God bless you guys.